On March 14, 2003, 17-year-old Hannah Foster left home to spend time with her friend Helene. A few hours later, they said goodbye at the bus stop. From that moment on, Hannah was never heard from again. But thanks to the quick work of the British police, they managed to discover a very strange call to the emergency services, which eventually helped to solve the case. Hannah Claire Foster was born on August 31, 1985 in England. She lived with her parents Hilary and Trevor and younger sister Sarah in Southampton. Hannah was a model student and always strived to get the highest grades in her senior year of high school. She was preparing to enter medical university, and since childhood the girl clearly knew what she wanted to study. Her family always supported her in achieving all her goals. On March 14, 2003, 17-year-old Hannah decided to take a break from her long studies and go for a walk with her friend Helene. The girls went for a snack and a drink at a well-known local bar. At 10:40 p.m., they decided to go home. A surveillance camera recorded them walking together down a nearby street. According to Helen's friend, they reached the bus stop and started waiting for the shuttle bus that was supposed to take her home. Hannah, in turn, decided to walk, as it was about 1 kilometer to her house and she thought it was not a very long distance to walk. Then the bus arrived, the friends said goodbye, and that was the last time they saw each other. Hours passed, and Hannah still hadn't come home. At 5 a.m. on March 15th, her parents began to worry. It was unusual for her to come home so late, and if she stayed over at a friend's house, she made sure to let them know. They called and texted her, but there was no response, although Hannah's phone was still on at that time. Several hours passed, and at 10:30 a.m., Hilary and Trevor decided to go to the police. They had already spoken to Helene, and she had told them everything that had happened. They also called Hannah's other friends to see if they had seen her that night, but none of them knew where the girl was. When Hilary and Trevor arrived at the police station, because Hannah was a minor, her 18th birthday was still a few months away, and because her behavior was unusual for her, the officers decided to start looking for her immediately. As is always the case in such cases, the person who last saw the missing person is considered a person of interest. In this case, it was Hannah's friend, Helene. She was interviewed by the police in the presence of her parents. Helene was very adamant in her testimony. She told the police what she had already told Hannah's parents, and the CCTV cameras outside the bar and bus stop confirmed her story. Helene had never told a single lie and was therefore no longer of interest to the investigation. Now that the police knew she had nothing to do with Hannah's disappearance, they had to start looking elsewhere. Luckily for the investigators, the girl's cell phone was still on at the time. It was on all night and all through the early morning. During this time, she received calls from her parents, as well as messages from friends. Helen herself was texting and calling Hannah to see if she had gotten home safely. Through all these messages, it was possible to track where her phone was. Each time Hannah received a call or message, the phone would connect to the nearest communication tower. In this way, several points could be marked. The officers also asked the phone company for the call and message history of the girl's number. One thing that stood out to the authorities from this record was that in the early morning hours of the day of the disappearance, Hannah's cell phone received a call from an emergency number in England. Further investigation revealed that the emergency number records listed the call as a silent call. The operator answered the call and did not hear anyone on the other end of the phone. She told the caller that if help was needed, to press any key on the phone, but none was dialed. The operator eventually mistook this for a silent call, terminated the call, and continued on with her work. Several police technicians listened to the call, adjusting the volume to see if they could find anything in the call, and indeed they did. From far away, a girl they mistook for Hannah could be heard talking to a man. This call was decrypted, and the transcript was reported by the media. However, the original audio recording was never released. Apparently, the phone was either far away from the two people or in a bag or backpack, and so the caller, mistaken for Hannah, did not hear any instructions from the operator. The following is a dramatization that appeared in the media with a transcript of the audio recording. You live in this country? Yes. English? Yes, I'm English. Where are you from exactly? Farrington. My name is Sarah. Sarah. Yes. From the movement of the phone, police assumed that Hannah was traveling by car in the early morning hours. From the voice and accent of the caller, they determined that he was an elderly South Asian male, leaving them with many possible suspects. Fortunately for the investigation, Hannah's cell phone was still on when the call was discovered and all reports were made. Thus, it was possible to determine the approximate location where she may have been. The phone was in Portsmouth, 30 kilometers from where Hannah was last seen. It took several hours to find the exact location. Eventually, the girl's phone was found at a waste collection point along with her handbag. By this time, the police feared the worst. They were treating Hannah's case as a kidnapping, but after discovering some of her personal belongings, they decided that it could be a case of murder. A few hours later, the investigators' worst fears were confirmed. On March 16th, Hannah Foster's body was found in the countryside in the bush. It was found thanks to the great efforts of the authorities, who involved hundreds of people to search all the places where the victim's cell phone was located. It should be noted that the body was several kilometers away from the recycling center where the cell phone and purse were found. Therefore, the assumption was made that the person who did this first got rid of Hannah's body and then proceeded to dispose of her belongings. Forensic examination of Hannah's body established that the cause of death was asphyxia as a result of strangulation on the face and neck. There were scratches on the girl's body. It was evident that she was fighting for her life. In addition, she had various hematomas on her head and legs. Forensics also found that she had been raped before the murder, and a DNA sample was taken from her body in the form of seminal fluid. The police entered the sample into their database of all registered offenders, but the search was inconclusive. The sample was therefore saved for later comparison with possible suspects. At that moment, it was clear to the investigators that they needed to find the person who had taken Hannah's life. But the job was difficult, as they had no leads and no specific suspects. The investigation team decided that perhaps by reviewing the CCTV footage they might be able to find something. They reviewed hundreds of hours of footage from all the cameras along the path of Hannah's phone, and concluded that the girl had been abducted and transported to the location where she was found in a white van. This white van was visible in several CCTV images, repeatedly and at all points where Hannah's phone was connected to the communication towers. It was announced in the media that a man between the ages of 35 and 40 from a South Asian country, such as Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Afghanistan, or Bhutan was wanted. The man was supposed to drive a white van and also be a person living in the area where the body was found, since it was assumed that in order to take Hannah's belongings to the waste collection point, he would have to know the area. A few days after that, a suspect was found. He was Maninder Pal Singh Kohli, a native of India, a father of two, married to a woman from Southampton. He had lived in England for many years and drove a white van provided to him by the company for both work and personal use. The man worked for a delivery service and his route was very similar to the points reported to police. His manager said that the day after Hannah disappeared, the man came to work very nervous and with a scratch on his face. It was his manager who reported him to the police. Kohli had no criminal record in either India or England. In both countries, he was a model citizen. The man was a very responsible father. His children's teachers said that he and his wife always attended all meetings and looked after the children. His neighbors also said they thought he was a very hardworking man who never caused trouble. Despite the fact that he had no criminal record and did not fit the profile of a man capable of raping and killing a girl, the police decided to investigate him. They were also able to obtain a search warrant from a judge for the van used by Kohli. They were able to find the vehicle parked outside his workplace. It was very strange that the man had left the van at his place of work, as he usually took it home. An examination of the back of the vehicle revealed blood and seminal fluid that matched the sample found on Hannah's body. It belonged to the same person, and the blood found in the back seat of the car was the victim's blood. This man thus became the authorities' main and only suspect in the crime. On March 19th, police went to Kohli's home to question him, but his wife said he was not at home. The day before, on March 18th, he had gone to India, ostensibly to visit his dying mother. Kohli's wife added that she did not know when he would return. The suspect's brother worked as a police officer in India, which made investigators very nervous. They began to think he would never be caught, and it seems their fears were confirmed. The Indian government gave them no answer as to Kohli's whereabouts. They were simply told that he could not be contacted. At the time, officers suspected that his family was helping him hide, but the man's father appeared on Indian television, saying that if his son had committed a crime, he should pay for it. Meanwhile, his brother was his main defender, saying he was wrongly accused and that he 100% believed he was innocent. On the 28th or 29th, Meninder's wife called and said there was a problem or something, that they were being falsely accused, and she was also being harassed. So he needs to go back to the UK, but I know for a fact that he is not guilty. If he committed this crime, hang him. I will be the last person to defend him. Time passed, weeks turned into months, and finally a whole year had passed since Hannah's murder, and no one knew where Coley was. The girl's parents were desperate. They wanted their daughter's killer to go to jail, but with no response from either the UK or Indian government. They decided to travel to India to find out what had happened in Coley's case. The parents took advantage of the media of that country. They gave interviews on television, in newspapers, and even handed out flyers with their daughter's face and Coley's, urging people to report the man if they saw him. They also said they were prepared to pay a cash reward to anyone who provided information about the man wanted by authorities in England. A few days after their arrival in the country, the testimony of a cab driver emerged. The cab driver said that a man with the same facial features as Coley got into his car. During the ride, they talked, and the man said that his name was Mike, that he lived in England, worked as a courier, and that he was currently on vacation in India. The cab driver passed all the information to the police, but unfortunately this did not help to find the man. On July 15, 2004, while Coley was on a bus to Nepal, he was stopped by an Indian police officer. His face was all over the news in the country, and it was thanks to this officer that he was identified. Coley was traveling to Nepal with his new wife. It should be noted that Nepal does not have an extradition treaty with the UK, and the police assumed that this is why he was trying to get there. The man already had a new identity. His real name was Mike, according to the cab driver. He had a new job, shaved off his beard, shaved his head, and he even had a new wife. Hannah's parents and loved ones thought the process would end there and the man would be sent to England. But what happened next was a procedure that stretched on for several years. Sometime after his arrest, Coley confessed on a television program that he had raped and killed Hannah. He said he had not planned to kill her, but she told him she would report him to the police. Obviously, I committed a crime there, so I escaped from there and went to India. Presenter's question: what did you do? Coley's answer: I kidnapped, raped, murdered Hannah Foster. Presenter's question: why did you admit it in the media? Why are you admitting it now? Coley's answer: I did it because I was so tired already. Tired of, running back and forth, and I want to get it off my chest. I just want to tell the truth. Even though Coley's confession was videotaped and it was known that he was in India, the authorities did not immediately take him back to England. The man, with the help of his brother, hired a team of lawyers, and they made the process very long. There were a total of 100 court hearings and 35 appeals to keep this man from being brought back to England for trial. As I said before, his brother was behind all of this, who told several media outlets that Coley was innocent, that he was made up as the man who killed Hannah, and that it was all a government plan to find the guilty party and close the case. It was only in 2007 that it was decided that he would indeed be extradited to England for trial. On July 28th of that year, Coley arrived in England and was arrested by authorities. He was charged with kidnapping, rape, and murder. He pleaded not guilty and changed the version he gave on television in his home country. He initially claimed that he found Hannah's body in a car, panicked, and dumped it where the police found it. However, this version did not match the timeline given by the surveillance cameras and the location of Hannah's phone, and the DNA test came back positive. The seminal fluid found on Hannah's body was Coley's. After receiving this information, he changed his version again. The man said that a group of criminals had forced him to rape and kill Hannah that night, and that was why he had thrown away the body, as he did not want the group of criminals to harm his family. The prosecution put before the court the following hypothesis about what they believe happened that night. Hannah and Helen say goodbye at the bus stop. Hannah waits for her friend to get on the bus and leave. After that, she starts walking home. There were no people or cars around her, so she was basically walking alone on the side of the road. Coley, for his part, was coming back from work. Seeing Hannah walking alone, he decides to drive up to her in his car to talk to her. The girl immediately realizes that this man is a threat to her and discreetly dials the emergency number. She does not lift the cell phone to her ear to follow the operator's instructions. Police believe Hannah's phone was either in her purse or in the back pocket of her pants. That's why the sound was so quiet. In the recording, Hannah can be heard starting to lie to Coley. She gives him her sister's name and age, gives him a completely different neighborhood than where she lived with her parents. Obviously, she didn't want to give her details to a stranger. After giving his details to the stranger, Coley somehow dragged Hannah into his car. It is not known whether he deceived her by saying he would give her a ride home or forced her into the car, as the conversation had already ended by that point. Police believe he drove with Hannah for several kilometers, then stopped in a deserted area, put her in the back seat where he raped her and then killed her. He drove a few more kilometers disposing of the body, and continued driving until he reached a garbage collection point. He did not want to take any of Hannah's belongings with him, as he thought that perhaps with nothing of hers, the police would not be able to accuse him. But what Coley didn't know was that the girl's cell phone was on and had enough battery power to last several hours, and that would prove to be an important detail in the investigation. After getting rid of the girl's belongings, he returned home, hung out with his family, and went on with his normal life. When he saw that Hannah was being searched for, he decided to go to India to hide. A trial was held in November 2008, and on the 25th of that month, the man was found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 24 years in prison. He was 41 years old at the time of sentencing, and the judge commented that Coley would not be able to apply for parole until 2032, at the age of 65. Friends, what do you think about this story? Write your opinion in the comments below the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this video. See you soon. On May 19, 2018, 24-year-old Justine Valdez was doing paperwork to renew her residency permit. Then she headed to the gym. After her workout, which ended at 4:20 p.m., she was going to drive home. Her mother, Teresita, sent the girl a text message and asked her to buy bread on her way home. The girl went into the store, completed her purchase, and went to the bus stop. She boarded the number 185 bus, which was traveling to Bray. After 6 p.m., the bus arrived at the village of Enniskerry, where Justine lived. The girl got off the bus and walked home. Her home was in a rural area, and the journey from the bus stop was not a short one. The walk home from the bus stop was 15 to 20 minutes. It was not difficult for a young, active girl to walk this way. She traveled it almost every day and knew the area well. But that day, Justine never returned home. Her mother looked out the window and waited for her daughter to return, but she was still gone. The woman felt anxious because her daughter was always in touch, and if she was late or changed her plans, she would contact her mother. Teresita tried to call her daughter, but it was useless. She didn't pick up her cell phone or respond to messages. The woman jumped out of the house and walked towards her daughter to the bus stop. But she never saw Justine on the way. She wasn't at the bus stop either. Teresita asked people on the street if they had seen her daughter. Several people confirmed that they had seen Justine get off the bus, but no one could say where she was now. She headed in the direction of the house and was soon out of sight. The girl had a striking Asian appearance, so she was spotted by passers-by. She was dressed in a sporty style, gray leggings, white t-shirt, sneakers, and a dark jacket. But where was Justine, and what could have happened to her? The worried mother ran around the streets looking for her daughter and for witnesses who could see where she had gone. But the woman could not find any trace of her. In desperation, she called the police to report her daughter's disappearance. Detectives took her statement and began searching for Justine. While the police were searching, the detectives looked further into Justine's life and social circle. They wanted to find out if she might have run away. Justine Valdez lived with her parents, Teresita and Daniel Valdez, in rural Enniskerry, Ireland. It is a beautiful, cozy place with a population of less than 2,000 people. She was born in the Philippines to a poor family. Her parents, in search of a better life, moved to Ireland from the Philippines. They settled well there, sending money to support their daughter to the relatives she lived with. In time, her parents were able to earn enough money to move their only daughter to Ireland, whom they loved more than anything else in the world. In 2015, Justine joined her parents. The girl was smart and aspired to get a decent education. She went to university and started studying accounting. She also got a part-time job to pay for her studies and help her parents with money. Justine worked part-time as a waitress at a restaurant in Bray and also babysat and cared for neighborhood children. Justine's family lived in the servants' quarters of a huge mansion owned by a wealthy and influential family. Her father worked as a gardener and her mother was a housekeeper who took care of the owner's house. The girl was very responsible, worked hard, studied, and fulfilled all her obligations. No one believed that she could run away and leave her family, which she loved so much. In addition, because of her busy schedule, she had few friends. The police called all the acquaintances of the missing person, and they all denied knowing her whereabouts. Justine was already out of the teenage years that some teens want freedom and run away from home. She was a quiet and homely girl and had never acted like that before. Therefore, the version of running away was not considered by anyone. The girl was always in constant contact with her parents and informed them about literally every step she took. That day was no exception. She and her mother exchanged 63 messages. The last message she sent was at 6:24 p.m. when the girl got off the bus. As detectives continued to search for information on the missing person's whereabouts, they received an interesting tip from co-workers. It turned out that just minutes after Justine got off the bus, police received a disturbing call. A female motorist saw a male driver of a black Nissan Qashqai pushing a girl into the trunk of his car. The girl was an Asian woman with dark hair wearing sportswear and was described as looking very similar to the missing person. The woman told police that while driving down the road with her 12-year-old son, she saw a suspicious car on the side of the road with its headlights off. The woman became alert and drove past it at a slower pace, looking closely at the auto. She saw a girl lying in the trunk screaming and the kidnapper trying to close the trunk. The woman was frightened but did not engage in an argument with the perpetrator. She drove a safe distance away from that car and called the police. Soon another motorist saw this frightening scene as he drove by. But this time, an Asian girl was sitting in the back seat of the auto and tapping fearfully on the window. That man didn't realize what was happening at first, but wondered what it was. When he got home and discussed the situation with his wife, he realized that something was wrong here. It looked like she had been kidnapped. That's when he called the police at 7:20 p.m. to report that the girl had been kidnapped. Another driver contacted police and said he saw a suspicious Nissan car driving erratically around 6 kilometers from Enniskerry. Patrol officers arrived at the location given by the female caller and found the missing woman's broken cell phone and a bag of bread on the side of the road. This discovery looked very disturbing and suggested that the girl was in trouble. They passed this information on to the station. The investigators, having learned about it and collected all this information, came to the conclusion that the kidnapper attacked the girl coming from the bus stop. He first tried to hide Justine in the trunk, but the girl resisted strongly, and he failed to do so. Then he put her in the back seat of his car and took the girl to an unknown destination. The kidnapper's black Nissan was put on the wanted list. Patrol cars drove around the area and searched for the car. Helicopters inspected the area from the air. By that time, it was already dark, which complicated the search for the missing girl. In the end, nothing could be found, so they decided to postpone the search until morning. At dawn, the search was resumed. While the search efforts continued, detectives once again interviewed a female motorist who had witnessed the girl's abduction. She was able to describe the perpetrator. Investigators gathered information on all black Nissan Qashqai cars registered in the area. They turned out to be very few, and one driver aroused their suspicion. It was 40-year-old Mark Hennessy, and he looked very much like the kidnapper's portrait. The police officers went to his house to check on him. The man was not at home, and the door was opened by his wife, Nicola. She told an amazing story. She said the husband had left for work yesterday at 7:30 a.m. as usual and then came home after 3 p.m., had lunch, and left at 5:30 p.m. for a bar. The husband had planned to have a drink and relax after a hard day's work, but never returned home, and his wife was unaware of his whereabouts. This information raised even more suspicions about Mark, and investigators began looking into the man. Mark Hennessy seemed to be a positive character from all sides. He was a model family man, husband and father of 2 young daughters, the youngest of whom was born 8 months ago in September 2017. He came from a respectable family and lived in an affluent neighborhood with other young families. Mark worked as an estimator on construction sites and earned a good income, supporting the whole family. The man had no criminal record and no problems with the law, and it was hard to imagine that such a model member of society could commit a crime. However, the police officers were well aware of the fact that such things sometimes happen. Mark could be a wolf in sheep's clothing and appear to be something he was not. Police officers went to the bar where Mark had gone last night to make inquiries about him. The staff confirmed that the man had been there the night before, but not for long. He had a beer, watched some soccer, and left because he found the match boring. Mark seemed quite normal. Toward midnight, he showed up at the bar again and looked very anxious and was out of sorts. Investigators looked at the bar's CCTV footage and were satisfied that the staff's statements were credible. Mark spent about 10 minutes at the bar. He left the bar at 5:40 p.m. and headed to his car while talking on the phone. He then got in it and drove away. After 11 p.m., he actually returned to the bar, chatted with a couple he knew there in the doorway, and left. Detectives were puzzled as to where Mark was between 5:40 p.m. and 11 p.m., what he was doing, and why he never showed up home. By then, investigators had requested CCTV footage of the very bus Justine was riding in and examined it. It turned out that Mark's black Nissan had followed the bus half an hour after he left the bar. He had literally followed it during the day, which made his behavior even more suspicious. The search for Mark's car and the missing girl continued. No one doubted that the disappearance of the two men was connected, and Mark was considered a suspect in Justine's kidnapping. Investigators couldn't track his cell phone because it was on and off. Mark called his wife once and told her he wasn't coming home again. It turned out that Mark even met with his family, who begged him to turn himself into police, but he refused and left. Mark's parents relayed this information to detectives. They tried to track him down again, but he was no longer available. He was always one step ahead. The police asked for the public's help through the media. They asked anyone who knew the whereabouts of Justine, Mark, and his car to come forward, and it helped. One woman who was listening to the press conference saw a similar Nissan Qashqai car on the road with a similar driver behind the wheel. She followed him to make sure it was really him. The woman followed his car to Cherrywood Park, where she took a close look at the driver. She then called the police and reported it. Arriving police officers found a man behind the wheel. He was covered in blood, and Mark refused to get out of his vehicle. Waving a knife in a threatening manner, he forced the police officers to use their firearms. The bullet hit him in the shoulder. After pulling him out of the car, they found him conscious. As they began to examine the auto, they did not find the missing girl. Police officers began asking him where Justin was, but he remained silent. Medics rendered aid to him, and he was taken to the hospital. Doctors fought for his life in the hope that he could tell where the kidnapped girl was. However, it turned out that the bullet ricocheted and hit him in the head. Soon, the man died. It turned out that the blood on his face and body was his own. He had several fresh stab wounds on his arm and neck. Police speculated that he decided to settle the score with a knife that was in his car because he was afraid of being exposed when the police caught up with him. Everyone was disappointed that although they were able to find the suspect and his car, they could not find the missing person, who was the main target. However, they did find a note, the contents of which were difficult to make out because of the blood. Police officers were only able to read the words "sorry" and Pax Castle. Apparently, it was an indication of Justine's location. The police almost didn't believe the girl was still alive, but continued to search for her. The parents prayed for their daughter's safe return home. Police officers conducted a thorough search in a wooded area in the south of Dublin, which was indicated in a note near the castle. First, her purse with documents in Justine's name was found, and then on May 21st, the girl's body was found in the woods. She was identified as the missing Justine Valdez. An autopsy on the body revealed that the girl had been murdered on the evening of the abduction. Cause of death was determined to be manual strangulation. The medical examiner determined Justine was raped. Also, another strangeness was found. As a result of toxicological examination, it was possible to establish the presence of a very small amount of prohibited substances in the body of the girl, which got there already after her death. However, it was not possible to find out how and why they appeared there in the body. Mark was found to have a large dose of these substances. It turned out that he had recently abused alcohol and substances, which is probably how they got into Justine's system. Mark's family life was going downhill. His spouses often quarreled because of his substance abuse, and he had accumulated debts. It turned out that he installed the dating app Tinder and actively corresponded with different girls there. Acquaintances told how he flirted with female bar patrons. Mark's DNA was found on the body of the victim. Now all police suspicions of his involvement in the kidnapping of the girl have been confirmed. Detectives concluded that the murder was sexually motivated, and Justine was a random victim who just happened to be around when Mark was looking for his victim. He was following a bus, saw the girl, and kidnapped her in broad daylight on the street, without even stopping when he came within sight of several witnesses. He then drove her away, raped and strangled her. Having studied the phones of the murdered woman and the criminal, investigators found that they were not acquainted, never communicated or called each other, They did not even have mutual acquaintances. However, upon closer examination, the detective's opinion changed. It turned out that Mark had traveled the route the girl had taken very often, and at the same time. This suggested that Justine's murder was not a spontaneous crime. Mark had been following the girl for a long time, and on that day, he decided and attacked her. He had probably previously just been watching her, studying her schedule, hesitating and waiting for the right moment. That day, he purposefully drove out of the bar towards the bus stop and followed the bus and then lurked and attacked Justine. She was the one he was waiting for. The locals were shocked by such a horrific tragedy. Such a thing had never happened before in their quiet, peaceful neighborhood. Many people came to support the bereaved family at the farewell ceremony. White balloons were released into the sky. Some of her loved ones wore pink t-shirts with Justine's picture on them. The family of the deceased brought her body and buried her in her homeland in the Philippines. They stayed there to live for a while, but later moved back to Ireland in 2021, where there were more opportunities. They moved to another city and changed jobs to get rid of the painful memories associated with those places. Share your opinion in the comments, and also put likes if this story seemed interesting to you. But don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. See you soon.